Okay. Um, so welcome back. Hope everybody had a good lunch and enjoyed the morning session. Hopefully folks have a better understanding of some of the nuts and bolts that it takes to keep the partnership going. Looking forward to this afternoon's panel and session so we can tell you about the projects and the work that we've been doing on the ground and what we're going to be doing in the near future here. So as you probably heard, if you were on this morning, our attendees and participants are muted and we can't see your video. And the webinar will be recorded and hopefully we'll be able to get it up on our website sometime soon here. So without further ado, I wanted to just share a little bit of background. And I think Jody's got the screen here. She'll bring up a slide and talk about the Soam Spar Integrated Fire Management Project, which you've probably heard a lot of people this morning refer to it as the Soams Project. It was the partnership's first large project. It's a demonstration project, so we really wanted to take our time to get things right and really think about how we're doing things. And the purpose of the Soam Spar project, it relates pretty closely to our vision statement. The purpose is to demonstrate how prescribed fire restores and maintains resilient ecosystems, communities, and economies, to help revitalize a balanced human relationship with our dynamic landscape. The landscape out there is so variable. The project is going to reinstate the use of traditional ecological knowledge and cultural fire and integrate that with more emergent restorative fire practices like prescribed burning at the landscape scale. To help reestablish the frequent fire cycles and really help the forests out. As we know, these forests are fire dependent landscapes. So, and also really focusing on some of the important cultural plants and focal species. So we did include multiple focal species that we concentrated on. One of those was the northern spotted owl, partly because legally and for the NEPA process and for the Endangered Species Act, NSO is one that we have to take into great consideration. And also because it is a good indicator of healthy old growth forest and mature forests. We looked at the fisher, Roosevelt elk, the Pacific giant salamander, and willow. And this project is also to promote our shared values and kind of encourage ownership and really stimulate and build our capacity and our local technical skills to help feel invested in stewardship. And again, the needs for the project, like our vision statement, is to help maintain and restore resilient landscapes, communities, and economies. So the project itself is establishing nearly 50 miles of strategic fire control features. So that's pretty significant. We focused on some of the largest neighborhoods and communities around Orleans and Soam Spar, under the administration of the Six Rivers National Forest. And so the decision was made in 2018. There was a lot of, So the project establishes 50 miles of strategic fuel breaks, but it also contains about 5,000 acres of treatment. And we'll hear about some of that mechanical and manual treatments and some of the prescribed fire burning treatments. So there was a lot of work that went into this. One of the things that helped us in planning the project was the fact that we had LiDAR for the project. And Jody, if you could go to the next slide. you can see here we have the slopes. So you can see the areas in the red are really, really super steep. And the areas more in the blue and purple are areas that are more flat ground. So that really helps in planning and drawing out units. And we also had the canopy tree height model. And I know it's really hard to see here, but when you have these maps, you can zoom in and almost see individual trees. So the cooler colors are the larger trees, like the purple, and then the blue is getting into more smaller trees, and the yellow and reds are more brush and smaller vegetation. So the prescription work team, use these looking really closely at every individual unit. So a lot of work went into planning this project. We have amazing forestry crews and archaeological crews, both from Mikwik and the Karuk tribe. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Josh Budziak, the Restoration Implementation Specialist with Lomakatsi Restoration Project, to tell us about the mechanical work that has been done so far. So Josh, please take it away, and can you tell us a little bit about what you do for the partnership?
For the purposes of the partnership, I've worked for Lomakatsi Restoration Project for like 20 years, but I help oversee and manage the commercial mechanical treatments for the Soam Spar Integrated Management Project under that stewardship agreement with the Karuk tribe, Mid-Klamath Watershed Council, and the U.S. Forest Service. Technically on the project, Lomakatsi is the primary contractor for this part of the agreement, but with a subaward to ABC Logging from Happy Camp, owned and operated by Butch Crocker. But with that said, I consider myself working under the direction of the Karuk tribe and the other partners. A little bit more of a background with the project. Last year, a little bit out of the ordinary, but we did manage to get some of the mechanical treatment started. Our limiting operating period got lifted a little bit later in the summer than what would normally happen, but we did manage to have a pre-work in June and get some of the laying out of skid trails and landings done in July and part of August. And we require that with all of our subcontractors for the commercial work with that prior pre-approval before any implementation actually any starts. We want to make sure that equipment stays on, out of equipment exclusion zones, off of the steeper slopes and out of sensitive areas. Don't like surprises. And all of the layout, for that portion of it was finished in the Patterson focal area. We did get started on the cutting August 31st, 2020 at the bottom of Patterson Road and worked our way up the road unit by unit. But as you folks know, a little bit more than a week later, the Slater fire blew up, and that pretty much halted our production for 2 weeks. And so when all things said and done, we ended up with about a little over a month and a half of actual work being done with equipment on the ground. The type of equipment we used was, typical ground-based equipment. This would include a dozer skidder, an excavator, dangle head processor, and a front-end loader. All this equipment was inspected for weeds prior to being delivered onto the site. And this year, we're actually hoping to bring on another piece of equipment called a feller buncher, and we'll bring that into the plantations to, one, help speed up production, and two, hopefully have a better end result with less residual damage to the stand, because the feller buncher just has a lot more control over the trees it cuts. It can lift them, pick them up, and just put them right in the middle of the main skid trails, which is an advantage over just hand falling trees. For last year's implementation, frequent inspections and communications were used to protect valuable resources, in the equipment exclusion zones, which could be cultural heritage sites or riparian reserves. Mitigation measures were put into place. For example, for the heritage sites, we worked closely with U.S. Forest Service and Karuk staff on site to actually make sure nothing was disturbed. And in addition to those EEZs, there were trees of interest to protect, and namely, these are going to be the black oaks, tan oaks, and madrones. And we used directional falling and proper skidding locations to accomplish protecting those trees. And in some circumstances, we were even able to purposely protect, small diameter open grown black oaks. Accomplishments so far, we've completed 9 units totaling 68 acres and have shipped 76 loads of logs to the mill timber products in Wairika. Moving forward this year, we plan on finishing all of the mechanical treatments in the Patterson and T-Bar focal areas, totaling around 341 acres. And we're hoping to get started around the end of this month, maybe early July. And we pretty much finish up what we started in Patterson and then move on to T-Bar. And then hopefully with the aid of a fellow buncher, we can accomplish this, in about 14 to 15 weeks total time after, considering we're gonna have to be putting in water bars on skid trails, prepping some landing piles, doing some road maintenance, and just taking into the account that sometimes equipment breaks down. Operations this year, no matter what, would likely end before November 1st, but ultimately it's weather permitting. Moving on to 2022, our goals are to move on to the Donahue focal area and complete all of those mechanical units, which would in turn completely wrap up all of the ground-based mechanical treatments for the Soam Spar project. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Kimberly.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. That's great. Thanks so much for being the eyes and ears on the ground out there. Yeah, we couldn't do it without you, and really appreciate, you also providing that communication back to the partnership so we know what's happening on the ground. So thank you for that.
Happy to do it.
Great. Next up, Eric Dara, the WKRP fire lead. I'm not sure what your title is for WKRP, but also the Fire and Fuels Program Manager for Mid-Klamath Watershed Council. Eric, can you tell us what has happened manually so far on the Soam's project?
Be happy to. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you had a good lunch. Jumping into this, we've been pretty involved in the manual implementation between MCWC and the tribe, setting forth, I guess, 2 years ago when Scott, the FMO, and myself got here and took these jobs in an effort to support this work, along with some other stuff. We jumped in and got our feet wet pretty fast, and it's been going pretty good. So as of right now, Patterson, Rogers, and T-Bar, all manual units that are going to be treated, have been either completed, cut and piled, or they're in a current contract. And so after these contracts right now that are being worked on are completed, which should be about midsummer, those 3 focal areas will have all their initial manual work done. Donahue has been that isolated one. We haven't got into it yet due to some Martin lops this year. We pushed it a little bit further. We do have funding to implement manual work in there with contractors and local crews, so we will be doing that. So the goal this summer is to complete Rogers, T-Bar, and Patterson. have everything piled and ready to burn, as well as starting to look at Donahue manual units. And we have the task of following up the mechanical work to do ground-based manual work in there, cut and pile. We have scouted some of those units. It's not going to require the same amount of piles everywhere as first entry, but there is areas that are going to require some more. And really what we're trying to do is develop a fire friendly stand in there, somewhere where we could put fire back into those mechanical units and have the severity stay relatively low, to not lose our remaining trees. So that's, you know, we're looking 2-3 years probably of manual work, working behind the mechanical at this point. We have been focusing our manual efforts in areas that we can bring prescribed fire into. There's been quite a bit of pile burning over the last year, and we hope to increase that this year. Limited operating periods have been a hurdle with the manual implementation, but we have been taking the time to go out and flag, you know, limited operating areas for our contractors, and just working around those to keep stuff happening on the ground. And now that they're lifted for NSO lops, we're going to start allowing those contractors back in there. So currently the tribe is managing 2 contracts with 2 separate contractors in the Rogers area, and I believe a few more units in the T-Bar area. Mickwick has 3 open contracts, all in the Rogers Creek focal area. 2 of those are local contractors, small crews, again, 5 to 10 people, and 1 of them is an outside contractor. We expect all that work. Rogers should be completed by mid to late September this year, and hopefully that gives us enough time for those piles to cure. So midwinter, February, we can start burning off the last of the piles. I believe that is the update as it stands now. Everything's going well. You know, we're real happy with the work that's happening. Yeah, contractors are really happy with the work being offered, and it's moving smoothly.
Yeah, and the work looks really amazing, and it is really hard work. So we admire the work that you do, and thank you for helping lead those crews out there. It's you know, it's pretty amazing work, and there's a lot of it. So really appreciate your efforts.
Thank you. Yep, it's a big team making it happen. So
yeah, and we're keeping track of that. You know, because this is our first demonstration project. Thank you, Eric. Because this is our first demonstration project, we have a pretty significant multi-party monitoring plan, and there are a lot of questions that we had to figure out to keep track of. So we, as you can see on the map here, you know, it's pretty small, but all those little dots are plots. And so we are doing pre and post implementation monitoring and effectiveness monitoring. And it's all centering around the ecological, sociological, and economic effects from the work that we're doing. Some of the questions that we came up with are, did we increase heterogeneity out there? What is the structure and forest composition change? Did we reduce the fuels in the project area? Did thinning treatments retain and protect the larger trees, especially the trees of interest? We chose larger hardwoods to protect and thin around. So how did those species respond? Did they respond as desired? And if not, why? Are we able to do all the prescribed burnings that we're looking to do? And were our objectives met? How did the fire burn? And also on the social side, what is the preparedness level of the local residents and around the neighborhoods now? And do they feel it has increased? Is their preparedness increased afterwards? Like how do the people who live around there feel about the treatments and the fire around their area? How does that make them feel? Do they feel safer? And is there support locally for the projects? And ecologically, our work crews, the archaeological crews who do the surveys before implementation, some of them are out there during implementation, and the forestry crews that Eric is helping lead. How many jobs is that creating? Like, how many local people are we able to employ? And it's not just local jobs, but living wage jobs. So there's a lot of questions that we ask. And we also have some larger research questions and things that are being looked at on a little bit of a deeper level, like you heard from Dr. Frank Lake this morning with the Pacific Southwest Research Station Forest Service. There's LIDAR forestry plots that focused on tan oak and huckleberry. So they'll be looking at how those sites fared pre and post implementation. There's the Pacific Southwest Research Station and the MICWIC CAL FIRE Carbon Investments Project. So what it does is it takes the LIDAR and focuses it horizontally so you can see the vegetation. So you can measure the fuels, and you can also measure the carbon that's in those stands. The Karuk Natural Resources Department with UC Berkeley, and again, the Pacific Southwest Research Station, their agroforestry resilience plots, looking at food security and resource evaluation to evaluate the different approaches in data collection. And how those cultural resources, the food and the basketry material, fared throughout the treatments, and did we improve those areas? And there's also research with Humboldt State University with Professor Kane and Rickard to evaluate the effects of the fuels treatments on hardwood survival and how they fare during the mechanical treatments and the underburning. And the Six Rivers National Forest, the Forest Service has quite a list of project design features and best management practices that will be monitored. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Tanya Chappell at the Mid-Klamath Watershed Council and the botany program there, leading the invasive species monitoring and polling. She's done an amazing job. We know exactly where all the weeds are out there and how we're going to treat them. So we're looking at those. And we'll also be incorporating some of the TREC's prescribed fire training implementation. If we're able to do that in our Soam Spar landscape. So we'll be looking at that as well. Other projects also include the, you might have seen a little red spot on the map earlier. I don't have a slide of it, but the Leery Project, which is closer to the border of the Hoopla Reservation, WKRP, the partnership, adopted that project because it was a natural fit for us. That treated over 700 acres of mechanical implantations and nearly 1,000 acres of manual thinning in plantations and also underburning. And the Orleans Community Fuels Reduction Project, it had quite a sordid history, but it also helped propel change in the relationships between the Forest Service and the Karuk tribe and the local community. So while it was an older project and much of it has been done, yeah, I think Jody's going to switch the slide here. You'll see the areas in the like the seafoam green, that is the areas that have been accomplished. And the red, orange, and pink are the areas yet to be accomplished. So the supplemental project agreement between the tribe and the Forest Service is just finishing up. There's about 277 acres of mechanical, but there's also some manual work and underburning associated with that project. And while this was not initiated by WKRP, it did have some fire and fuels objectives to the project. So what the partnership did is we went out and reviewed those stands that are left and worked with the Forest Service to help shift and change the mark, so to speak, so it more closely resembled our shared values. So we're looking to get the OCFR project completed. And now for the future, that the project that we are currently working on, the Ikxariyatuuship Project, as has been said, is more than a project. It's a real effort and endeavor. And I'm excited to introduce Annalisa Tripp, who is a collaborative stewardship program manager for the Karuk Tribe Natural Resources Department. And she's going to tell us about the project. And Annalisa, could you tell us also a little bit about what you do with the partnership?
Hi everybody, Aiki, Nanatuyum, Annalisa Tripp. I work for the Karuk Tribe DNR for past 5 or 6 years or something like that. I'm not sure. I'm new to my role as the collaborative stewardship program manager, but I primarily worked in archaeology and cultural resources. So that's kind of my background. And I've been working in WKRP for all those years. Yeah, I wanted to share about Ikxariyatuuship. A lot of what I'm sharing, since I'm new to my role, I wasn't really a part of putting it together or formalizing it. So a lot of others who are here today will have more to, or have a little more context. So if I say something wrong or you have something to add, please do, because I'm still learning. And yeah, this project, that being said, this project is really close to my heart. Ikxariyatuuship, Off-Field Mountain is where my grandfather was raised. He was born and raised on that mountain. And there's 2 villages within the project area that right at the base of Ikxariyatuuship that I come from. Untitled and Katimin are their names. And so that's kind of where we are located on this project. It's right near the center of our Karuk world. And yeah, I still use, besides working on Ikxariyatuuship for all these years, I also, you know, my family gathers there a lot of different resources, and, you know, the work that we're doing will ensure that that can continue for generations to come. So thank you all for all your work to make that happen. I need a screen share. Let me see if I can figure that out. Can you guys see?
That looks great.
Okay. So yeah, I didn't have a lot of time to put this together. I apologize for some text heavy things here, and I'll probably just read from some of them, but I think it was important to share. So for one thing, the name of Ikxariyatuuship means spirit person or spirit mountain, and Ikxariya, like it broke down right there, means like spirit people or spirit person, and Tuuship just means mountain generally. To go back to this picture, so Ikxariyatuuship is in the background there. You can see there's like a larger mounted mountain and then a little knob off to the side that's Ikxariyatuuship. The larger one's called Matamui and the little one's called Satamui. So yeah. So yeah, it's a very special place. I'll just read, but Karuk people have historically used fire to manage their cultural environment for millennia. Indigenous burning and uninhibited lightning ignited wildfires continuously renewed heterogeneous wildlife habitats and plant communities. Depending on the vegetation type, fires burn in intervals between 1 to 30 plus years. The aim is to mimic frequent consumption of surface fuels and vertical lattice fuels to keep most flames close to the ground. So anyway, the goal is to revitalize indigenous management principles as a cultural norm, which will therefore restore biodiversity, ecosystem processes and functions across this project landscape and increase resilience for future fires. There we go. So anyway, in 1910 or 1911, the annual ceremony of broadcast burning that traditionally occurs on Ikxariyatuuship as part of the World Renewal ceremonies was forcibly ceased. And then there was also a near complete wildfire suppression, exotic species invasion, logging, high stalking from reforestation practices that occurred between 1950 and 1994, which all altered the historic cultural landscape. Conifers and fire intolerant vegetation have encroached into areas where frequent fire would have maintained a more diverse plant community. So we're seeing, like, you know, heterogeneity, or actually a homogenization across the landscape as a whole, whereas traditionally we would have managed certain areas throughout our landscape for specific materials and species. So yeah, let's see. So basically, under current conditions, tribal access to quality and abundance of cultural and natural resources is diminishing, and the ignition of cultural fires on Oakfield Mountain, as it is right now, as a part of the Kodik World Renewal ceremonies, would potentially pose a safety risk to local communities and focal species. And so the goal, and by incorporating cultural values, can be blocked right now by regulatory standards established to address unchecked extractive principles and associated impacts on declining species. So part of the goal of this project is to make it safe to be able to restore that practice. So the core team, I believe, and others involved with WKRP identified the purpose and need for this project, and I'll read those. The purpose for the Ikxariyatuuship Project is to help fulfill the Kodik's right to define and practice their cultural identity relating to a portion of their ancestral territory, which is now administered by the Six Rivers National Forest as part of the Canopy cultural area. And there is a need for restoring social, economic, and ecological conditions conducive of community-based restoration and maintenance burning, vital to the perpetuation of Kodik culture, while supporting the ceremonial and subsistence pruning, burning, and coppicing practices or activities of the Kodik people, cultural burning and access to freely practice religion and associated indigenous management practices and principles under the governance of the Kodik tribes. Traditional knowledge, practice, and belief systems is critical to achieving this need. They also, identify the desired condition that will be hopefully achieved, and the Kodik tribe revitalizes traditional ecological management and strengthens longstanding socio-ecological relationships and practices. Kodik people use and tend the landscape in accordance with their culture practices and principles. Climate adaptations restore human responsibilities and appropriate relationships with species and ecosystem processes. This effort will restore and maintain conditions conducive to revitalizing Kodik ceremonial and subsistence burning practices on Ikxariyatuuship, which are closely linked to ecosystem health and socioeconomic well-being. So in the process of trying to figure out how to treat Ikxariyatuuship, there are some focal species that were identified, and these were selected to represent different components of the landscape, and those that are either one directly regulated by laws such as the Endangered Species Act, or associated with water quality regulations, or founded in TEK as being foundational in human-fire relationships. The focal species provide an umbrella framework for the landscape level analysis. And some of these components are regalia species in tribal ceremonies. If these components are put together, management for the focal species promises to provide a realistic and holistic approach to whole landscape management. And these are the following 6 focal species that were chosen. The first is California black oak, or Jantip. I'm not going to say the scientific name. I don't think I can pronounce that. But anyway, it's a very important ecologically, culturally, and economically. It's found in the middle elevation forest zone. It's a critical species contributing to important traditional foods and regalia. So there are 2 areas that were identified for this species to promote specific treatments for it. Unfortunately, in some of them, they're already starting to be dead and dying due to being shaded out by large conifers and not experiencing the fire that it would be needed to create a more open, black oak grove that would have been managed by Coatic people for acorns traditionally. And so that's something that we wanted to see. And then the same for tan oaks, or Hunye, another very important food species for Coatic people, the staple food. And it's also very vital for many wildlife species as well. There are a lot of tenant groves kind of identified by our cultural resources and other field crews, not only, for to call it special treatment, but also they're kind of, because they're so heavily managed historically, they're also like high probability for finding food processing tools as well, just from an archaeological standpoint. So tan oak is very susceptible to high intensity fire, but can benefit from cultural burning that decreases tree and acorn pests and reduces competitive vegetation. Then there's the western pond turtle, or Asahwu. Those of you who are familiar with Ikxariyatuuship know there's a turtle pond, one of the important places on Ikxariyatuuship, and it's always cool to be able to see pond turtles there. It's an endemic turtle, which occurs in permanent and intermittent waters in this project area. And both its aquatic and terrestrial habitats are extremely important. Turtles seasonally migrate up to 500 meters from the river to upslope breeding and hibernating areas. The shells of the turtle would have been used for purses or containers, but it also mentions, if any of you are familiar with the fire race, it's a classic Coatic tale about how the Coatic people got fire. And the turtle is just one of the many animals who helped to bring fire to the people. So that's appropriate for this project as well. Their habitat is at risk from fire under hot and dry conditions. So part of the treatment will be able to make sure that the conditions are right for their area to make sure that they're not threatened by that. Also, Manzanita is also a very important tree species. Looks like we've identified 2 different kinds, and I'm not sure if there's the right Coatic names. There's so many different kinds of Manzanita, but Pirishkampa and Pahav are the ones here. There's a lot of text here, but basically, the berries would have been an important food source. The wood it still to this day is used in ceremonial fires and a lot of tribal ceremonies in this area. And it's definitely one of those species that has been very impacted by being shaded out by those large conifers and by fire suppression. So this is going to help to restore that. And then hazel is a very important basketry species. It's a diverse cultural use species, different uses for different ages and growth forms of the plant. Depending on what kind of basket you're making, you're going to want different sizes of sticks. And so it's really important for it to not only experience pruning and that sort of thing, but also fire is really important for making the right kind of sticks that basket weavers will want to use. So fall burning promotes longer shoots, which are harvested 7 to 18 months following fall burning. We'll also be looking at treating certain hazel patches for nut production as well in this project, but definitely this is one of the main goals, is to create hazel patches that will be usable by basket weavers. And then humans, this project encompasses an area where quite a few people have lived since time immemorial. And all those things I've just described, will all, if treated properly, will all, also impact the humans of this area and make, it's very just like all dependent on each other and each other's health. So there's a lot written here, but basically, yeah, very important species that has been impacted by fire suppression and by the decreasing accessibility and availability of quality and abundant resources that hopefully this project will help to address. So yeah, I mentioned the unique prescriptive areas. So there's areas that we've highlighted for targeting specific prescriptions written to enhance each of these focal species. They're written in the field collaboratively with different specialists, those working groups and subgroups that others have mentioned are part of that, but specifically the prescription work group. There are other areas outside of those focal species identified UPAs, but those include things like meadow restoration, and as well as like targeted invasive treatment areas where we want to make sure that we hit things such as Himalayan blackberries, cheatgrass, Medusa head, and there's a couple others, but I think there's the main ones. So just make sure that those are getting the proper treatment. Here's a map, or two maps that kind of show, might be hard to see. In the next slide, I kind of zoom in, but basically you can see the whole project area. And there's the pink polygons, which are meadows that have been identified based on the 1944 aerial imagery. And it might be hard to see, but basically the goal is to kind of restore those. Obviously in the 1944 aerial, they're more open than they are in the 2021. By the time the aerial imagery happened in 1944, though, there have already been several years that have passed since fire suppression. So just to keep in mind. And then you'll see the different colored boundary lines that are for the UPAs. There's a zoomed in version. You can kind of see. Yeah, so description of some of the treatment methods. A guiding premise for sustaining ecosystems and protecting biodiversity put forth by Kaufman and others is to manage ecosystems to conserve the structure, composition, and function of all elements, including their frequency, distribution, natural loss, and revival. Fire effects are woven through all aspects of this premise. The dynamic nature of ecosystems and the scale of landscape patterns and processes are fundamental characteristics that the interdisciplinary team considered in integrating TK and agency knowledge of fire into land management. The proposed action would apply a phased, strategically placed manual, mechanical, and prescribed burning treatments units across the landscape and around private end holdings to establish defensible space, critical fuel breaks, and safe access routes to aid fire control and frequent burning to promote TCPs. I just want to highlight our crews that are out there. We have really great collaborative crews, and many of them have been working together for several years and just really developed great working relationships, and their unique approach and the methods that they have developed over years is really truly special. Two of the ones that are out there the most is the Archaeology and Cultural Resources crew, and for this project it's just the Forest Service and the Kahoot tribe working together, but they've covered So I just look at my notes. Approximately 700 acres of coverage, and they have collected like 4,500 GPS points, most of which are about cultural use species and cultural vegetation, which has not only served for their purposes, but also served in providing guidance to all the other crews and to the team who are coming up with treatment plans. So they've done some really great work out there, as well as finding all the artifacts and features and stuff out there that they're continuing to work this season as well to create plans to protect those. Yeah, and then our forestry crew as well, or one of the main crews that are out there every day, along with the culture resources, and they work. These pictures are funny. So the culture resource crew takes a lot of field photos, which is great, but the forestry crew doesn't take very many. And this was actually taken by Vicki Preston, one of the culture resources crew. So yeah. But yeah, they are tribal crew along with Mikwik and also sometimes the Forest Service, and they've been working together for a long time. And for Ikxariyatuuship, they've done all the ground truthing. They've done 72 stand exams or 172 stand exams over 6 stratas, and they've determined all the riparian zones and unit boundaries for mechanical treatment, and they're currently working the private property boundaries. So they've been working really hard out there. And yeah, other crews that work out there, of course, Fire and Fuels have started identifying fire lines and fuel break areas. So that's been really great. And as well as invasives crew have already started doing some eradication of different invasive grasses out there and making plans for further treatments, and of course wildlife. So yeah, and there's more, but yeah, there's a picture of some cheatgrass and some of the K1 guys doing a prescribed fire, not on Ikxariyatuuship, but just looking to the future. And that's all. I just wanted to again say thank you. I'm grateful to work with such wonderful people. And I continue this work because I'm interested in the health and vitality of Canopy people and our culture, and the survival and continuance of our plant and animal species who share this place with us. And yeah, just really grateful to everyone who helps to make that happen. So, Yotwa.
Thank you, Annalisa. It's so amazing. It's such an amazing, exciting project to work on. And just so folks know, I believe we're going to aim for having scoping done by fall this year sometime. So there'll be an opportunity for the public to come out and take a look and see what's being proposed. So thank you very much. I do hope we have time for some question and answers. And so moving downslope, since we've talked about all of our upslope projects, we're going to be just touching upon all the in-stream work that's happening. Will Harling, who presented this morning, the director for Mid-Klamath Watershed Council, along with Luna Latimer, and the Orleans Soam Spar Fire Safe Council, and Karuna Greenberg, the restoration director for SRC, are going to give us a quick highlight of all the in-stream restoration work that's been happening to help out salmon out there. So we'll go ahead. Feel free to introduce yourself again, please.
Thanks, Kimberly, for that primer. Yes, Will Harling, Mid-Klamath Watershed Council, WKRP co-lead, also going to be presenting with me. I put your slides first, Karuna, this time, so I made sure not to take up all the time and then not hear all the great things that are going on the Salmon River. So, and I'm going to try and not waste a bunch of time messing around this time, and let's get right to screen sharing and starting this presentation. So if folks can see the screen on your end, Kimberly.
Yeah, we can see it.
or anyone? Cool. So these are some great photos of the Kelly Gulch project that SRC implemented last year. And
What we're seeing right now, Will,
Yeah, wait a sec.
yeah, go ahead.
Christina.
it looks like we're seeing the additional fisheries projects ongoing with not in slideshow mode. So I think maybe we have the wrong screen again. Oh, there we go.
Oh, dang it.
Oh, it just showed up and then it went away.
Oh, I think my my connection is really wonky right now. So I'm going to share that again, and there may be some delay. So hopefully you're seeing what I'm seeing right now, which is the first slide. You got that?
Now we
Yes.
got it.
Okay, great. Karina Greenberg, Restoration Director for the Salmon River Restoration Council, and just wanted to share with you a few in-stream restoration projects that are going on. It's a really important part of our work overall with the Western Klamath Restoration Partnership. We really try to take this, to be looking from the mountaintops down to the rivers and back and see that connection. So there are a lot of in-stream restoration projects that are moving forward throughout the entire scope of WKRP. These are just a few that are in the works and moving forward on the Salmon River. We have the Windler Off-Channel Habitat Enhancement Project and the Red Bank Off-Channel Fisheries and Riparian Habitat Enhancement Project, which is just upstream from that. And then the Kelly Gulch Barrier Removal Project, which ties into the Kelly Gulch project that we have just implemented recently and are doing monitoring on. There's also upcoming Matthews Creek Floodplain Habitat Enhancement Project in the kind of middle South Fork, as well as a Know Nothing Creek in-stream barrier removal project. And we're just finishing up the Hoteling Gulch Aquatic Restoration Project, which is also a barrier and stream enhancement project. So we have a lot of projects going on. We've also been working on the kind of whole watershed approach of doing kind of a huge in-stream floodplains and mine tailing restoration assessment. And so there's a whole series of like 15 projects that have come out of that. Only a couple of them are highlighted here because they're a little bit in the future. But this fisheries restoration is just super critical right now. I'm sure most of you are aware that our salmonids and anadromous fish are really in trouble. This is a really kind of tragic year throughout the basin for fisheries. And it's really critical that we are restoring and enhancing and protecting and maintaining all of the fisheries habitat that we can so that we can continue to have these critically important species maintain and hopefully improve through time. And of course, we're working, there's much larger projects in the works like the Klamath Dam removal that we've all been working towards for so long. But in a year like this, it really seems just super critical, even beyond these larger projects that are listed here, that we continue to do that really critical fish passage enhancement work at all of these little tributaries to make sure that our juvenile and later adult salmonids have access to as many of those and as much of those little cold water tributaries and refugia that are out there, because it's already looking to be a really, really rough year. So those are just a few of the projects that we are working on the Salmon River. We are really excited to continue this great work and to learn from the projects that we're doing with extensive monitoring and keep that adaptive process going. Thanks.
Thanks, Karina.
You're muted, Will.
Thank you. You know me better than I know myself. These are some photos that Karina shared looking at the hoteling project where it connects to the South Fork, showing the new bridge as well as a little off-channel habitat. These are from ground level. This was a huge project they implemented last year. And these are some photos of the Kelly Gulch Salmon Habitat Improvement Project, including several off-channel features, an alcove, and the lovely Fork School kids coming to check it out. I always appreciate how SR in restoration. I know we're a little short on time, so I'm just go through this briefly. This is kind of a check on some of the projects that were implemented last year, follow up. Charles Wickman, Charles and Witzy whole crew, Jimmy and others have done a bunch of great work in conjunction with Soto and the tribe and John Grunbaum, tribe and others. So Mitzi and Florence and others just completed the as-built survey of the Horse Creek helicopter woodloading project, and they calculated we put over 202,000 board feet of wood into Horse Creek last October, which was equivalent to 1 million pounds of wood. He just went up there and took some of these before and after sequences. You can see the top photo is the before photo and the bottom photo is the after photo. I believe this is of site 9, looking upstream and downstream. And already we're seeing just a picture of some of the wood that was brought by Mark Thomas Logging, a local contractor who's built a lot of our off-channel projects and has been supplying a lot of the large wood. The helicopter flew all these logs in. And this is one of the upstream ground crew. We've got members of the Columbia Helicopters team here, Mitzi and I, and Bob from the Umpqua National Forest who helped lead the show. Great crew. These are some photos of the as-built on the left, which shows where each log was placed. They recorded points for the, yeah.
Just so you know, right now, the slide that we're looking at is 3 folks and there you go. Now we're looking at 2 maps with the 3 pictures in the middle. And you can see the log placement on the right. So you might have been 1 slide behind. Go ahead.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I noticed the connection is a little worse right now. You know, one of the most exciting things about.
May I just interject for 1 moment? It is 1:29 and we do have a few questions. If we're not able to get to your questions, we will be in touch with you and help answer your questions the best we can, just so folks know. And also, if you do have questions, go ahead and type those into the question and answer panel. And like I said, if we're not able to get to the questions today, we will get back to you. So apologies there, we're running a few minutes over. So those of us who can continue to stay on, please do. So thank you for that. Okay, well, sorry about the interruption. Go ahead.
No, thanks for great facilitation. I was really excited about this close-up of the as-built that you should be seeing on the right side now. This entire floodplain is connected with multiple anti-branching streams to see, and I encourage folks who ever want to go for a hike up Horse Creek to this upper reach. It's about a one on at a heart attack and come back to life. I also want to give a shout out to Bob Bearding, who did a lot of the work and used to add to the wood that was loaded by the by the helicopter. Bob passed away this fall in the Slater fire in Happy Camp. A long time years. It was for our community. One time, and I'll just breeze through these some highlights. We're continuing to monitor the off-channel projects at Fish Gulch on just a little bit down from Horse Creek Looping Project. You see on here, it was dug by many years ago, was connected as part of this project. And Jimmy Peterson, who does the pond monitoring for us, the largest coho that he had ever seen in his 10 years of monitoring coho. These are not them. This is a project I took from that monitoring from that mining pond the previous year, but just example of
you're coming out.
Habitat, especially.
Will, could you turn off your video and we can see if that helps? I'm only getting, I don't know about everybody else, maybe 30% of what you're saying.
Let's see.
Oh dear.
Yeah, that helps. And we're
Does that
looking
sound
at,
any better?
yeah, it sounds much better. And we're looking at a slide of, there's a small stick underwater with little juvenile fish.
Man, there's a crazy delay because I switched to this Aikens Creek slide about 20 seconds ago. So I apologize to all of you. I think given the time and this connection, maybe we'll just have to send out this presentation as a attachment so that you don't have to go through this painful. That sound like the right thing to do?
Sure, that sounds great. Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, and if so we'll try and provide the presentation by some means, maybe on our website. I'll let Luna and Jody help with that, since they do all the heavy lifting with the technical issues and everything. So it is 1:34, so I think we're going to go ahead and close the afternoon session for today, just to respect everyone's time. So please know that if you do have questions, we will get back to you. Luna, do you know that if we're able to reach out to Tracy and Ryan and Lindsay? Do we have, or to Tracy and Lindsay?
Yeah, and I think that Bill was able to answer Ryan's question. Thanks for that, Bill. But we definitely have contact information for Tracy and Lindsay.
Okay, great. So, well, thank you everyone so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed the afternoon session, and apologies for running a little bit over, but we have so much information to share, and so I hope you understand, and thanks so much for joining us.